Hi, Pastor Darren here, First Baptist Church of Lamar. I am so glad that you are studying God's Word with us again. It is our hope and our prayer here at First Baptist Church that everyone associated with First Baptist Church of Lamar has opportunities to grow to be a little bit more like Christ and a whole lot different than the world. Today's message really rings true with that prayer. And so as I've been preparing for this, as I've been studying for this, as I've been praying for this, I want you to know I've been praying for you. I might not know your name. I might know your name. I might not know what is in your world and what you struggle with. I might know what you struggle with. I just want you to know that you have been prayed over this week, because I do really sincerely want you to become a little bit more like Christ and a whole lot different than the world. Before I read this passage, I want to make one thing really clear. We're going to talk today about a thing called sanctification. What is sanctification? Sanctification is growing to be more and more holy. It's not about salvation, okay? If you have not accepted Christ as your Lord and Savior, if you have not accepted his forgiveness, this passage and this message is going to be slightly confusing, because it's going to make it sound like I'm saying you have to do things in order to be saved. No, it is by grace that you have been saved. And grace means getting something that you don't deserve. God gives you salvation when you ask for it. God wants to save you. God wants to scoop you out from the sin that you live in. And it's not based on what you've done. It's not based on how important you are or how unimportant you are. God wants you to be a part of his family. And it's based on what Christ did and not on what you do. And I want to be really clear about that. Today's message is really aimed at those who have accepted Christ, those who are part of God's family. Now, if that's not you, I really, really, really want you to get a hold of me. Get a hold of somebody that you know is a believer in Jesus Christ. Get a hold of a local pastor or something like that. Get a hold of somebody. We want to help you find that relationship with Christ. That's really super important to me, to Christ, to the ministry here at First Baptist Church of Lamar. But then what happens next? Hebrews 10:14, by one sacrifice, Christ made perfect. If you've accepted Christ, you've been made perfect. He's made perfect all who are being made holy. And that being made holy, that's where we're going to focus today. That's where today's message is going to land. Our passage today is in Jeremiah chapter 2, beginning in verse 5. Let me read what God's word has to say. This is what the Lord has said. What fault did your fathers find in me that they strayed so far from me? They followed worthless idols and became worthless themselves. They did not ask, where is the Lord who brought us up out of Egypt and led us through the barren wilderness, through a land of deserts and rifts, a land of drought and darkness, a land where no one travels and no one lives. I brought you into fertile land to eat its fruit and rich produce. But you came and defiled my land and made my inheritance detestable. The priests did not ask, where is the Lord? Those who deal with the law did not know me. The leaders rebelled against me. The prophets prophesied by Baal, following worthless idols. Therefore, I bring charges against you, declares the Lord. And I will bring charges against your children's children. Cross over to the coasts of Kittim and look. Send to Kedar and observe closely. See if there has been anything like this. Has a nation ever changed its gods? Yet they're not gods at all. But my people have exchanged their glory for worthless idols. Be appalled at this, O heavens, and shudder with great horror, declares the Lord. My people have committed two sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I so appreciate this passage. I so appreciate your patience and yet your clarity in just how mindless we can be. We see the sun rise and set every day. We see your faithfulness in every way, in every moment of our lives. We don't even think about whether or not there's enough oxygen in the room to breathe. And yet, we work so hard not to worship you, not to follow you, not to glorify you, but to be like you. We work so hard to replace you. Even those of us who have turned our lives over to you, quietly, slowly, can be pulled back into ways that the world works. Oh, Father, forgive us of this. And help us today to recognize where you are and where you are moving. Challenge us, support us, so that we can be a little bit more like your Son and a whole lot different than the world. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Story is told of a pastor far, 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 far away from Lamar, with absolutely no connection to Lamar anywhere. And I put this picture up to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about, but I just pulled this picture off the internet. I have no idea who this guy is. Story is told of a pastor who had a dress code on Sunday morning when he preached. He was supposed to wear a three-piece suit, and then on top of that three-piece suit, he was supposed to wear his vestment robe and the mantle and the whole getup. Well, he didn't have a problem with that for most of the year. He did have a problem with that in June, July, August, in those 3 months, because the church didn't have air conditioning. And although you could open the windows in the sanctuary and can get a cross breeze there, the front of the church received 0 cross breeze. It could get to 100, 102, 103 degrees up on the platform behind the podium of the sanctuary, and it was unbearable for this pastor. So he went to his church leadership team and said, you know what, I would like to renegotiate the dress code, especially for these 3 months. Can we talk about this? And immediately he received instant pushback. No. This church has existed for 200 years. Every pastor we've ever had wore this kind of outfit. We are not watering down the gospel by watering down our dress code. It's not going to happen, period. And one of the guys even brought up that, he believed that Jesus wore this kind of outfit during the Sermon on the Mount. If it was good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for us. It's good enough for you. You have to wear this outfit if you're going to be our pastor. Well, the pastor just was like, no. You guys aren't listening to me. This is inhumane. I'm going to have a heat stroke up there if I have to do this anymore. And they're like, nope. God will supply all of our needs according to his riches and glory. He will carry you through this. Well, after back and forth, the chairman of this leadership committee said, I understand we're not solving anything here, so let's just put it to a vote. The rule book says that when we get to places like this, we vote, and then we all stick with what the vote said. So he said, all in favor of the pastor not having to wear all of this vestments and all of this outfit, please raise your hand. And the pastor raised his hand, but he was the only one in the room that raised his hand. And so he said, all right, all in favor of the pastor continuing to wear the traditional clothing of a pastor that God has ordained and all that, blah, 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 blah. Raise your hand. And everybody else in the room raised their hand. The chairman looked at the pastor and said, you know what, whether you have a valid point or not, rules are rules. And here it is, 10-1. Sorry, you have to wear the robe. You have to wear the vestments. You have to wear the three-piece suit. You have to wear all of it. At this point in time, the pastor just kind of lost it. He really wasn't feeling heard by this committee, and you know, some of the arguments that were thrown out to make him wear this just didn't make sense, and so he just kind of lost his temper. You guys are not listening to me. Jesus did not wear this kind of outfit. You know, God will supply all of your needs according to his riches and glory. You're pulling that verse right out of context. I have talked to God about this. I have prayed about this. I am certain that God would not approve of the decision that you guys just made. This is not okay. And here's the thing that really irritates me about this whole thing. You didn't even pray about this. You just took it to a vote. You don't even care what God has to say. I care what God has to say. Let's ask God what God would want. And with that, he pounded his hand on the table. In that instant, as his hand hit the table, a giant lightning bolt came out of nowhere and struck the table, breaking the table in half. Everybody but the pastor, everybody but the pastor is thrown against the walls. And they're trying to get themselves back together and just kind of wondering what happened. And they're all in a daze. And the chairman of the committee kind of sat up and looked around and felt his eyebrows that had been singed off and his hair that had been singed as well, and everything's disheveled and everything's a mess. And he looks around the room and he says, well, I think we can determine what God wants in this situation. However, Pastor, with God's vote, it's still 11-2 and majority wins. Rules are rules. You still have to wear the entire outfit. Of course, that story is completely made up, but it does kind of prove a point. Rules are important. Now, I know since the 1970s, we've really had a problem with rules here in the United States. I don't follow rules. I do whatever I want to do. I do it my way, whenever I want to do it. I don't answer to anybody. I wear whatever I want to Walmart. Nobody can tell me anything what to do, blah, 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 blah. Do you realize that all of those are actually rules? When I say I'm going to do whatever I want to do, that's a rule. Might only apply to me, but that's a rule. Truth of the matter is, everyone lives by rules. I sometimes get people when we're talking about the gospel and they want to push back hard. I'm not interested in Christianity because Christianity is just a bunch of rules. Well, first of all, that might not be as accurate as you're making it out to be. But the truth of the matter is, atheists have just as many rules as the Bible has. In fact, sometimes their rules are even more complicated than the Bible's rules. I'm going to live my life my way, however I want to, when I want to, how I want to. I'm the one that chooses what I want to do and what I don't want to do. That's a rule. But then I go to work, and work says that I have to do things a certain way in order to get paid. Well, I want the pay in order to live however I want to live, but that means I have to modify the rules so that I get the paycheck so that I can live however I want to live. Am I really living out the rule of it? I'm doing it my way? everybody has rules. I found these three guys, and I thought that they were quite interesting in some of the rules that they lived by. The first guy is Alexandre Dumas. He was the French writer that wrote The Count of Monte Cristo and The Three Musketeers, two of my favorite books, by the way. I enjoy them quite a bit. I've reread, those are two on my reread list. Alexandre Dumas had a rule that he would eat an apple underneath the Arc de Triomphe every single day at 7 a.m. And when he made that rule, and he lived that rule out till his last dying breath, 7 a.m., you could find Alexandre Dumas underneath the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, eating an apple. He had a rule. Next guy, Hans Christian Andersen, wrote another prolific writer. Several stories that we hear on a regular basis, especially around Christmas and some of those kinds of things. Very, very, very prolific writer. Had a rule. He would never lay down in a bed. Never. Whether it was just to lay down and rest or whether it was to go to bed at night, he would never lay down on a bed without posting a note on the bedpost that said, "He is not dead yet." Might actually be a good rule, right? When I first heard that, I kind of wondered what happened when he actually did die, because the sign would be incorrect then, right? Unless he died in a chair or something like that. And that I don't know, but that's a rule that he had. The last guy there, Salvador Dali, a very eccentric guy to begin with, so you should probably expect something bizarre, but Salvador Dali would never get into a car that was intended to move. So he would never drive a car, he would never ride in a car without there being a head of cauliflower in the car, at least one. Oftentimes he would have an entire trunk full of cauliflowers before he would leave. It was a rule of his that you must have a head of cauliflower in the vehicle if the vehicle is going to move and Salvador Dali is in the vehicle. I do not understand that rule, but it was a rule for him. We all have rules. We all have rules. Even if we say we don't have rules, we have rules. Do you eat soup with a fork? If you do, that's a rule. If you don't, that's a rule. Do you want to make sure that your socks match? If you do, that's a rule. If your socks don't match, that's a rule as well. A rule is anything that you live consistently by. Everyone has rules. The question isn't, do you have rules? The real question is, do the rules I live by work? That's the real question. Now, with that brings in today's passage. God, through Jeremiah, is calling out the Jews in the days of Hezekiah. He's calling them out and he's telling them, I got a problem with you guys. I got a problem because you are not living by the rules that I gave you. That kind of goes back to that argument that, in Christianity, there are just too many rules. No, it really doesn't, but I can see where that argument can come up. God is looking at these Jews and he's saying to them, you guys are messed up when it comes to the rules by which you live. The rules that you are choosing to live by do not work. And this is the part that I think a lot of people, even some Christians, really struggle with. We look at the Bible and we look at the rules that God has placed there and we go, Oh my goodness, that's so restrictive. Oh my goodness, that just really kind of cramps my style. Oh my goodness, I don't want to do that. I would rather do what they're doing over there. I'd rather do what. How come he gets away with that? How come they get to do that? And I don't. And suddenly we feel like they're restrictive. We totally forget that God created the rules by which He wants us to live, because that's where optimal life exists. You got a garbage disposal and you put a hammer in it. You read the instructions and it says, do not put hammer in garbage disposal and turn on. Well, I'm not going to live by these rules. Nobody can tell me what to do with the garbage disposal that I bought. And so you put a hammer in there and you turn it on. What happens? You don't have a garbage disposal anymore, do you? Because the garbage disposal wasn't created for hammers. Newsflash, you're not wired to be a murderer. You're not wired to be a liar. You're not wired to be an adulterer. You're not wired to work 7 days a week all day. You're not wired to worship things other than God. You're not wired to envy. You're not wired to hate. You're not wired for these. God's rules exist so that when you follow them, you find optimal function as a human being. And when you make up your own rules, they don't work. At least they don't work long term. Now that's the summary of what Jeremiah is trying to get across to the people. But God gives him a wonderful metaphor to get this idea across. Jeremiah 2:13. They have forsaken me, they being the Jews. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water. Let's talk a little bit about a spring. I remember once, I was a little kid. We went to somebody's house. I don't know who it was. I don't even remember where it was. But we went up in the mountains, and they had this cabin, and the lady of the house took us for a little tour of their property. And we went down this little path and down the hill just a little bit, not too far. And we took a turn here, and then they had a bench there, and they had this spring. The water was bubbling up about that high, just shooting up out of the ground. And then the water was, there was a little pool down a little bit further, and then it poured off and then went down into a stream down into the canyon below, or the valley below, I guess. It's a better term. And when we got there, she pulled out these little bathroom cups, these little paper bathroom cups. And she handed it out to each one of us, and she said, go ahead and get a drink. What I did, I didn't, city boy, what do I know? I took the cup and I just shoved it into this bubbling thing to get a drink. I didn't put it on the side. I just shoved my whole hand in, and instantly my hand was like frozen. It was cold. And I pulled it out right away. My cup was full, and I took a drink, and brain freeze, because I didn't take a sip. I just gulped it. Brain freeze. It hurt like crazy. I said, wow, this is cold. Honestly, I think it's the coldest thing I've ever put in my mouth other than ice cube. That something that was liquid that was cold. It was cold. But when I went in my mouth, I remember just how absolutely sweet this water tasted. It tasted like sugar water. It was delicious. And then I watched other people, and I got another drink, and I sipped it this time, and it was the best tasting water ever. I remember when they started coming out with bottled water, and it had spring water on the side. I was like so excited. I went and I bought like 5 bottles of these water, and I'm like so excited. I took a drink, and I was like, this is not the spring water that I tasted wherever that was in the mountains. There's a couple of elements to this metaphor that we need to understand. First of all, with spring water, it's easily accessible. Where you know where the spring is, you can get a drink. You don't need to bring a bucket. You don't need to bring an auger. You don't need to bring anything like that, a rope or anything like that. You need hands, or you can just stick your face right into the drink, right? And you can get a drink. It's easily accessible. Number two, spring water is fresh water. And at least for this metaphor, spring water is fresh water. Tastes good. Okay? It's not contaminated. Number three, it's always present. When we started on this little journey around this lady's property, when we started on this journey, she put cups in her purse. Why did she do that? Because she knew the spring was going to be there. She knew that water was going to be there. It's dependable. Okay? God refers to himself here as the spring of living water. He's easily accessible. He is fresh. He is vibrant. He is refreshing. He is dependable. And what he says here is that the Jews of this day are just walking right by what is easily accessible, what is fresh and refreshing, and what is dependable to do what? To go dig their own hole and try to get water that way, a cistern. Now, a cistern is different than a well. A well, you dig down until you hit the water table, and then you have water coming up from the water table, and that's different. A cistern is just a hole in the ground, okay? There's no source to this water. It's completely dependent upon rainfall or other water sources like the cistern that are like the spring that might run a little bit into this cistern, okay? So the cistern, first of all, is a lot of work. It's not easily accessible. You got to dig the hole. And once the hole is dug, then it's completely dependent upon the weather. Secondly, this water is stagnant. It sits there. And it sits there, and it sits there. Okay? Water runs into the cistern. What does it bring with it? Well, whatever is worthy or able to be carried with it. You know, it can carry all kinds of things into the cistern. And then with stagnant water, you also get insects that like to lay their eggs, or insects that fall in and try and get a drink and they fall in, or something like that. Or even worse, animals and things like that, right? So when you drink water out of a cistern, if you don't boil it or filter it or something like that, you might be ending up with, at best, extra protein, or at worst, some kind of contamination that is poisonous. Okay? Cistern. It also, these particular cisterns that God is talking about here are broken cisterns. They've got a crack in them. So it rains and rains and rains today, and that cistern gets full of water. Yay, we got plenty of water. This is going to last us a whole month. But the next day you go out, and it's half full. What happened? Well, it's got a crack in the bottom. So the water is leaking out and going into the ground and eventually getting to the water table. You go out the third day, and it's completely empty. And all that you can see in the bottom of your cistern is all the junk that got pulled into it in the last rainstorm. All the mud, the yuck, okay? So what God is saying here is that these Jews are walking right by God, God's word, God's will. They're walking right by that, and they're finding places to dig their own holes so that they can say they did it their way. And God's calling them out on this. He's saying, why are you doing this? Where is the logic in this? What are you trying to accomplish here that is better than my will? Well, your spring of living water has too many rules. So I'm going to apply my rules as how to dig a cistern. I'm going to apply my rules as to how to collect water. I'm going to apply my rules as to how I need to boil the water now. I'm going to have to apply my rules as to how I'm going to maintain this thing, because those are less rules. No, they're not less rules. They're actually more rules. They're just not God's rules. And that's what God's calling them out on. That is what God is calling them out on. We're so busy digging a hole, and God's at the top of the hole. And he's going, guys, better option, better option, better option. And we're going, nope. I want to be able to say I did it my way, which is a rule. And it's a rule that doesn't work. It didn't work for the Jews because ultimately God sent Nebuchadnezzar and basically destroyed Judah a few generations later. It didn't work. It was within the same generation, but God intervened because the rules that mankind were living by, the rules that the Jews were living by, were so toxic that it was making them no different than everybody around. Let that sink in. No different. They became the same poisoned, yucky, scary people that everyone else around was. Now, here's the important piece to this, or at least something that I think we need to wrestle with. The Jews never went, we hate God, get away, God, leave us alone. They never said that. They continued to make their sacrifices. It's just that they didn't want to put all their eggs in one basket. Sure, we'll go to the temple. We'll make our annual sacrifices. We'll do what the law of Moses said to do. Then when we get home, we'll figure out what Baal wants us to do. We'll figure out which kid we're going to sacrifice to Baal so that we can have a better crop. We're gonna go visit the Asheroth poles so that we can have more kids. We're gonna, see what Chemoth has to say. We're gonna look at what all these other gods have to say. And if we do whatever we need to do to please all of these gods, then certainly one of them is going to step up to the plate and do what we need to do. So it's God, Yahweh, plus someone else. You see how that's a cistern? It's their own rule. It's not God's rule. And I think one of the things that the modern day Christian really needs to wrestle with is what God was calling the Jews out for in Jeremiah's time. Really needs to wrestle with. Is God your top priority? Or is God your only priority? When the going gets tough, is your first knee-jerk reaction to pray, to seek God's face? Or is your only knee-jerk reaction to pray, to seek God's face, to study the scriptures, to find wisdom? Or is that just on the top of the list? And if that one doesn't work, well, then we've got plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E, plan F, down to plan ZZ. Because you realize that if you have anything other than God, you're operating a cistern. You're not camping at the life spring, the wellspring, the living waters of God. God has expectations. God has rules. God has envisioned a way for you and for me to live. And when we walk by those things and say, really stupid things like, well, that was for a whole different world, or that doesn't apply to me because I don't want it to apply to me, or I don't like it, so I'm not going to do it. Or, well, this one is not my favorite, but I hear it way too much. God has forgiven me for all of my sins, so what I do doesn't matter. I can do whatever I want to. I'm free to sin, if that's what it's called. Paul said, should I sin that grace may abound? Absolutely not. Here's the thing that really catches me. And it really kind of proves this cistern point. Cisterns have holes, and they leak, and they're never full. J.D. Rockefeller, the richest man on the planet at that point in time, was asked, how much is going to be enough? How will you know that you have been successful? How will you know that you have actually arrived? And his answer, as the richest man on the planet at that point in time, his answer was, when I get a little bit more. Do you see how his cistern would not hold what he valued? I have never met a farmer who worshiped his farm, who worshiped his crops, who really believed that his success was based on how much crop he brought in, that his well-being was not necessarily based on God, but was based on his behavior in the fields. I have never met a farmer who made enough money, who had a big enough farm, who brought in enough crop. I've never met one. I've never met a business owner who worshiped his business or her business, who really believed that it was their job to provide for themselves. It was their job to do what they needed to do to have a successful life. I have never met a businessman who worshiped their company, that had a big enough company or had a big enough bank account. I've never met a coach who worshiped coaching, who worshiped team sports, who worshiped, the wins, the victories. I've never met a coach that worshiped coaching, that had enough trophies. Never seen an employee who worshiped their job, feel like they got promoted in a timely fashion or they made enough money. I've never met a pastor who worshiped their church, who worshiped their role in the church, who had a big enough church or who made enough money. You know what the number one reason why people get divorced? I'm not satisfied anymore. Do you see how all of these are cisterns with a hole in the bottom? I'm going to be the happiest person on earth because I married the best person on earth. And then the last kid leaves. And then you look at each other and you go, who are you? I don't remember you anymore. And you've changed because all we've done is worship the kids. All we've done is worship the family. And then the last kid leaves for college, or the last kid moves out. And we look at each other and we go, oh my goodness, who are you? And suddenly that cistern is empty. And we walk away from each other. All of those scenarios and every other scenario that's out there. If you are feeling empty, it's because you've got a cistern instead of a wellspring of life. Let me say that again, because this is pivotal to this whole idea. If you are experiencing emptiness in your life, it's because you're dependent upon a cistern that you dug, a cistern that does not hold water. You are dependent upon that instead of the wellspring of God that's right over there. You just don't want to play by God's rules. You don't want to depend upon Him. You want to depend upon yourself. You set up idols for yourself instead of drinking from the water of the wellspring of God. Let's flip that coin. Wellspring life. People who camped out at the wellspring of life. You know, the first guy that comes to mind is Bill Bright, co-founder of Campus Crusade for Christ. He won this major award, and with this award came a check for $1 million, and it was made out to Bill Bright. Bill Bright held that check, and he had somebody take a picture of him holding that check because he wanted to say, you know, I want a copy of that picture because I am now, I can say that I've been a millionaire. But he turned the check over and he signed the check over to Compassion International to help children who are underprivileged and who don't have water supplies and who don't have food and who don't have education. And he was so excited about the possibility of helping hundreds, maybe thousands of children find a personal relationship with Christ and have their physical needs met at the same time. He was more excited about that than winning the award because the award didn't fill his tank. The award didn't fill his cistern. He didn't have a cistern to fill. He was scooping water from the wellspring of God. Billy Graham, very early in his ministry, he capped his salary. I'm not going to make any more than this. I don't care how much money Billy Graham Association, Billy Graham Evangelistic Association brings in. I don't care. It's not going to be a percentage. This is what I need to live on. This is how much money I'm going to make. And he capped it. That seems strange. Why would he do that? I mean, he could have been a multi-billionaire, right? He didn't have a cistern. And that cistern didn't depend upon how much money he brought in. He was at the wellspring of God. And he was dependent upon God. And he played by God's rules. And he lived to glorify God. He was not digging a cistern. And so money really didn't matter. The other guy that comes to mind right now is Tim Tebow. You know, if you look at Tim Tebow's football stats, he's really not the greatest football player out there. But if you look at his life, if you look at his witness, he's one of the greatest. And 50 years from now, should the Lord tarry, 100 years from now, should the Lord tarry, and football still exists, I strongly believe that the name Tim Tebow is going to ring through society because he lived his faith. And he was not about digging a hole and saying this is what greatness is being the best football player, although he plays his best and I love his passion. But he was not sitting there scooping and trying to make a cistern of fame and fortune and all those kinds of things. He's at the wellspring of God, and he's drinking from the living waters. I love watching Tim Tebow in pictures. I don't think I've ever seen him not smiling. And even when he's not like, smiling for a picture or something like that, even when he's not doing that, he still smiles through his eyes because he loves Jesus that much. He's dependent upon Jesus that much. And I love watching what he does for kids. Because it's very evident that what he does for kids, he's not really doing for kids, he's doing for Jesus. I take you back further to a guy by the name of Paul. Let me read what Paul says here in Philippians chapter 4. I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content in whatever the circumstance. I know what it's like to be in need. I know what it's like to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in every and any situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. Can you just see Paul's hands scooping water out of the wellspring of God instead of digging a hole? He says this in 2 Timothy. Give me a moment to find it here. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7 and 8. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge will award me on that day. And not only me, but all who have longed for his appearing. Do you realize that Paul wrote that passage while he's in prison, preparing himself to be executed? It doesn't sound like something that I want to put on my resume as a good pastor. That's not going to gain me notoriety. He died, getting his head chopped off after being in prison. That's all cistern kind of work. Even in prison, even with the threat of death right over his head, he's drinking from the wellspring of God, not relying on himself, not digging a hole. He's leaning on Christ and letting Christ decide what's important and what's not. Just like Jeremiah gave to the people of Israel, of Judah, you too have a choice. Are you going to go dig your own hole? Play by your own rules? Or are you going to hold fast to God, to God's word, to God's will, and let him lead you in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake? One leads to life, and life overflowing. One leads to the exact opposite. Choose wisely. God bless.